Fire, a tool especially beloved by new pirates, but often used ineffectively. So let's get our science gear and figure out the best. Hey, what's this red stuff do? Fire is often misunderstood, and most people over-prioritize both using it and dealing with it. I'll show you both the mechanics of fire and how to use it most effectively to sink each type of ship. But the main takeaway is that if you're just throwing a firebomb or two in a random spot, it's unlikely to do anything meaningful. You don't want it to get this out of control, but it's only harmful in certain parts of the ship. Each ship is divided into multiple invisible fire zones. Some are next to the hull, some are in the middle of the ship, and some overlap with ship components like the wheel. Each of these spots can have fire started or spread to them, but their damage capabilities are not equal. If a fire is overlapping a damageable ship component like the wheel, mast, or anchor, or against the hull, it'll do damage every 60 seconds. But like all things in Sea of Thieves, it's more complicated than that. So let's look at the deeper details of fire spread. The game seems to have different behaviors for two types of fire spots that I'll call origin fire spots and spread fire spots. Origin fires are usually caused by firebombs, while spread fires are ones that have spread from an origin fire or via another starter source, like an unfortunate cooking incident. Hi, it's me, I'm the problem. All types of fires self-extinguish in 3 minutes. You can see fire appearing and disappearing in waves in the sped up footage, especially on the back deck. During this 3 minutes, if the fire is in a location that is capable of taking damage, it'll have 2 total damage events. The first is 60 seconds after the fire initially starts, and then again another 60 seconds later. For fires that are against the interior hull of a ship, the damage event can cause 0 to 3 holes depending on whether or not there's a hole spot beside the fire zone. So not all fire spots against the hull are equal. By the way, the hole size is 40% compared to a cannonball's 60%. And yes, it can stack. Fires that damage the wheel, mast, or anchor will do 1 peg or crack of damage per damage event. Where origin and spread type fires differ is the speed at which they can spread to nearby spots and which spots they're even able to spread to. Origin fires take 90 seconds before they'll spread up or sideways, but not downward. You'll see this as a dark, cloudy spot with bright sparkles for about 20 seconds, which will then ignite into a full spread type fire. Spread fires have an extra feature for spreading. They'll do their upward and sideways spreading much faster at only 30 seconds and are also able to spread downwards at 60 seconds. Neat. This explains why it's a lot more difficult to deal with fire that is spread for a while. It's not just that there's more fire, it's that the spread type fires are actually significantly more aggressive than the origin fires. But that's also why fire is a really ineffective tool when it comes to damaging and sinking ships in combat. That first 90 seconds before the fire can spread makes it really easy to extinguish, and even the 60 seconds before damaging the ship is a pretty generous amount of time mid-combat. So how do we use fire most effectively to sink a ship? Now, there's a bunch of caveats here. You shouldn't normally be using fire to sink a ship, you should be using cannonballs. However, sometimes you don't have a cannon anymore, so here we go. I'll show you the best fire spots to use on each ship, because not all fire spots cause maximum damage. On the Brigantine and the Galleon, some spots even cause 0 damage. So it's a simple formula. Fire on the bottom first, and then fire on the mid. If you start with a mid fire, it'll work on a sloop or a brig, but the water will put out the lower fire before it pops the lower holes, making it take much longer to sink. You shouldn't bother with multiple lower fires because the second fire will be put out by the first hole taking in water and extinguishing it. It'll take 60 seconds for those little popcorn kernels to start popping, so defend that lovely little sizzle like your snack time depends on it. For the sloop, only that very forward spot on the bottom deck and the 3 spots surrounding the map table will cause 2 holes. Every other fire spot on the ship will cause only a single hole. You can use your 1 extra firebomb to cause 1 extra hole somewhere on that mid deck. I chose by the window. For comparison, if you use an extra mid-deck fire instead of a bottom deck hole, it'll take about an extra 30 seconds to sink the sloop, so definitely get that lower hole popped. The Brigantine is a bit of a special case. You want to get the bed spot because that pops 3 holes, as well as this window over here. Don't mind if I set myself on fire by accident. The final fire spot you choose that is against the hull doesn't actually matter because it will get extinguished by the other holes. So I just put it near the water barrel because it's a nice distraction just in case the enemy decides to start putting out fires. Speaking of which, make sure you empty their water barrel so that it's harder for them to put out the fires. Weirdly, this results in almost the exact same sinking time as the sloop. It takes about 1 minute and 44 seconds to sink the Brigantine this way. Now, the Galleon is definitely the hardest to sink with fire alone, and not really viable, but if you somehow find yourself able to do this, the bottom 4 corners are the only spots that reliably can pop 2 holes, but even then it's really difficult. You also have to be really picky and precise with where you put fire on the mid-deck. Only one spot can cause 2 holes, and many spots against the hull actually cause no holes at all. But if you copy what I've done here, these spots are far from the water barrel and do some damage. Again, this isn't really viable against a 4-person crew, but once you have these holes popped, it takes about 2 minutes and 27 seconds to sink the Galleon. Definitely slower than other ships, but not bad. Now, before I get into a few extra spots of fire trivia, if you learned something in this video, I would love to know by you giving this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe for even more future science. Now, on to the final bits of trivia. The stove takes 5 minutes after food reaches the burnt state to cause a fire. This immediately causes the more aggressive spread type fire instead of an origin fire, and will continue to do so every 2 minutes if the food remains on the stove. Fires can save their spread event even if a spot isn't viable, for example, if water is preventing the spread. As soon as I remove this water from this very toasty brig, the entire floor begins to sparkle. You can get an extra hole to pop on the lower deck of the Galleon by continuously bucketing to remove the tiny bit of water that would appear and otherwise extinguish the second fire. This is a completely useless fact, but now you know it. Fire doesn't work on a ship if the rain can reach it. Don't put fire on the outside of a boat in a storm. Go put it on the inside of a ship. It still works there.
You might explain why your ship was on fire before we got here. Alright.